Okay. I'm just going to go ahead and get started because we're only together for 2 hours and I want to make sure that we have a lot to cover here today. So, we will do some introductions. If you have any technical issues, Bonnie and I will be presenting. So don't message us, message Alex. He's our tech person today. Or you can just drop it in the chat. He'll be monitoring that. And we will go over some logistics in just a moment here, because we want you all to get your CEs. That's probably, other than this being a very timely topic, I think that most of you are probably here because you want your CEs. So we'll go over logistics and then we're just going to jump right in because, like I said, we're only together for 2 hours and we want to make sure that we want to respect your time today. Okay. Welcome, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started. So today, to earn your CE certificate, this is a live event. So whatever state you're in, you will get live credits. I always say, always check with your state board because every board is different, on how many you need. And we are ACE approved and NBCC approved. So you will get credits if you are ACE approved, that's for social work, and NBCC is for counselors. So just a heads up on that. You do have to stay for 80% to get the live credits. If you can't stay for 80%, you can take it as a self-study, but it will not count as the live credits. We are recording today too, because people might want to watch the recording afterwards, or will be taking it as a self-study. Any questions, please put it in the chat, and someone from our team will be able to assist you. So, Alex or Bonnie, any other logistical things? Alex is going to drop in the chat. We just need to also confirm attendance. So he's going to drop in the chat a sign-in sheet, and just fill that out so we know that you're here. And also I will say, please, if you can, if you're wanting CE certificates, make sure that you change your name to what it is. So like iPhone, we don't know who you are if it's iPhone. So change your name to what you would like to be noted as for CE credits so that we can cross-reference when we are giving you all your certificates. Alex or Bonnie, any last logistical things before we start? Okay, see thumbs up. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. So you all are here today for something that I think is very, very timely. Bonnie and I have actually been planning this for months and months and months, and we feel that, I don't know, by the powers of timing, it happens to be incredibly relevant in the past month or so. So we are happy that you're here. And we really want this to be a space where we're talking about what's going on in our political environment, how we can support our clients. And we're also going to give a lot of resources for how you can be supported during this time, because it is a very intense time. And there's just a lot of stuff coming up for us as clinicians. So today we're going to be covering facing political anxiety, fears, and immigration. We'll talk about that more. I'm Dr. Megan Mitchell, and Bonnie Solis is with me too. She is part of our Agents of Change team, and we will go over our bios very quickly because that part is not as important as getting you the information today. So a little bit about me. My name's Dr. Megan Mitchell. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I've been practicing for over a decade. I am the founder of Agents of Change. Obviously, now we have moved into the CE space. And a little bit about my clinical work. I was a school social worker for about 8 to 10 years. Now I'm in private practice and I work mostly with children. And why is this topic important to me? My doctoral study, my doctoral dissertation project was focusing on implicit bias and clinical outcomes for minority populations. So a lot of this topic that we're covering was very present in the research that I did about being culturally responsive, culturally humble, and how we can really build high quality, culturally responsive care, clinical care for marginalized clients. So that's just kind of my summary. And I will introduce Bonnie. So Bonnie has been with Agents of Change for over 2 years, and she has her bachelor's and master's from University of Texas, Rio Grande. She is in Texas, so she has a lot of like on the ground um expertise in this area. She's worked with a lot of the clients that are experiencing this. Her clinical background, she also works with children, so crisis intervention for youth 0 to 17. She now facilitates therapeutic groups for clients 10 and up. And she is very involved in her local NASW Texas chapter. And she, like I said, she's really on the ground doing this work. So she has a lot of expertise there. She works from a community-centered approach, culturally responsive approach as well. So we have been thinking about this for quite a bit. And we are hoping that you'll have lots of good takeaways from our time together today. Some housekeeping, our learning objectives. What are some hopes that you will take away from today? Learning objectives. You'll be able to define socio-political stress and the politicized collective identity model, evaluate how these frameworks help clinicians understand the psychological impact of systematic oppression on marginalized clients, evaluate the effects of systematic stressors, such as immigration policies, the politicization of minorities on client well-being and identity. And then last, identify clinical strategies to create a safe and validating space for clients experiencing political distress. So we're hoping today you will take away some resources, take away some skills, and this is being recorded, and you will also, after this, get access to all of the resources that we're sharing. So just so you know, we have some worksheets, we have kind of some, like basically a clinician toolkit that you will have access to at the end of this. Okay. Just prefacing today, this can be a very heavy topic. There's lots of feelings, I think, going on right now in our communities. So this may bring up strong feelings, heavy feelings. Take time that you need. If you need to step away, if you need to take breaks, take the space that you need. So take care of yourself. And then there should not be any areas where you need to bring up client cases. But if you are in the chat speaking about anything from experience, make sure you're honoring client confidentiality. So no identifying details, try to keep things vague, no names, locations, just to protect the confidentiality of our clients. Okay. I am going to now hand it over to Bonnie, who's going to start us off with an activity. And you do not need scissors for you. If you have scissors, that's great, but you don't need scissors for this. You just may need a piece of paper. So I will let her tell us what the next steps are.
Yes, good morning, everyone. And I just want to preface that again, of making this a safe space, right? We understand that there's a lot going on during this time, and I ask that you understand where we're coming from as well. As Megan mentioned, I'm in Texas, South Texas, in a predominantly Latino community, as well as being third generation, understanding how we can definitely be affected, right? And understanding how our communities being affected, where you all might be, where you all are coming from. And I do want to ensure that we're coming from a safe environment, creating a safe environment here, and also within our offices. And to get started, I'd like for us to come from an understanding of where our clients may be um like sitting, right, depending on what generation they're coming from as well. So again, want to preface, if we're needing a break, we completely understand taking this time for yourself, but also learning these skills that we're going to be going over today. So I really hope that this is really helpful, and I appreciate you all showing up in another way on this topic. So if we can get out a piece of paper, if we can fold it into fours, if we'd like to rip it up into four different uh, separate pieces. Maybe we have post-its on in our desk that we can have access to, just four separate pieces there. And as we get that ready, we're gonna go ahead and write down some of our favorite things, specifically around if we can think of who is our favorite person. And this might be a little bit difficult if we have children and family that are so important to us, but if we can write down Who is our favorite person? This person could provide some safety for us, could be someone that we trust and can confide in. We want to write down this person that comes to mind. Maybe they give us love and support, writing down this special name. Um,
Pets
we
out
won't be sharing this,
loud,
so
funny. Someone asked if pets count. Yes, it doesn't have to be
yes,
human.
they are family, right? Definitely. We won't be sharing so much of this. So if you're comfortable with the name, then that's great as well. So we're going to share a favorite person. Now, if we can think of our favorite dish, what is our favorite dish or food that we create? Something that brings us back to that feeling of home, things like that we really love and enjoy. Maybe on a bad or rainy day, right? That we get to enjoy. Thinking of our favorite food or dish. Now, I'd like us to, on the third piece, if we can think of our favorite place. This could be something within our own home, whether it's our room, whether maybe it's our backyard. Maybe there's a special place within our community, within something of reach, right? Some place that we love to visit that could bring us some peace, right? Or that sense of home. So you can think of that place. And lastly, on the fourth one, what is a very important tradition for you? What is something that we practice? Maybe it's an annual thing that we really enjoy, that could bring together family, that brings together community, something that we look forward to. We understand maybe in the Latin culture, we love food and getting together to make food. So um, lots of that. In Texas, we do lots of barbecues, and that's important, right? So let's go ahead and name that as well. All right, now that we have this ready, I'd like for us to be able to look at all four pieces. And if we can grab one of the four, whichever this might be for you, we're going to pick up this one sheet of paper that we have, and we're going to have to rip up this paper, this one piece. Now we will have to grab our second piece of paper that we got to write something else on and have to rip that one up as well. And if we can grab our third piece of paper, and we'll have to also rip up this piece, whatever that might be for us. Might be our place, our special food, tradition, or person. And lastly, our fourth piece of paper. Of course, we can hold this really near and dear to us, but unfortunately, we will have to rip this piece of paper as well. What are some feelings that are coming through for us right now? If we can share that in the comments. Oh, definitely. And again, I understand that this can definitely be something that's difficult, right? But I want us to understand and come from a place where, as first generation migrants, we are at a loss of some of our very special people, some of our very special places. Although we can try to recreate our favorite dishes, it's something that can be really difficult, considering the grocery stores might not have all of the same things, right? So it's definitely something really awesome when we see that grocery store, that like Asian market, and like maybe an aisle that's in the store. I'm from Texas, so HEB, we have like certain aisles that sells like very cultured food, right? But we don't have access to the genuine um, fruits and vegetables and things like that. So we're also still at loss of our dishes, right, and our food, as well as traditions, right? There might be a loss of traditions depending, especially on our age, right? If we're coming and crossing over at a very young age, not understanding a lot of the concepts that were being behind that, right? Of what the adults held in that responsibility of holding this tradition, right? So again, just wanting to hold us in a place of understanding where our clients might be coming from, where they're sitting, and understanding that we can also be empathetic within our place. Um, Having this very slight feeling, I understand that it can be very, very heavy right now for us. But I think this just gives us a slight feeling of something that they have to experience, right? Once they have to journey over here and have the physical loss and are dealing with the grief um, that comes with this migration, not only for first generation, but also for second and third generation, where these stories and beyond, or these stories are shared, right? And not getting to meet these people or places that are so special for our loved ones. So again, thank you so much for participating in this activity. I know it's definitely really, really difficult to do, but just to give us an understanding of where our clients might be coming from, and what space we want to create for them as well.
Thank you, Bonnie. For me, when I had to, they were all difficult, but when I had to rip off my favorite person, which is my daughter, wow, that like brought up a lot of feelings for me. So I know people in the chat also were feeling big things, and I just, like Bonnie said, I want to center us on there's a lot of loss for clients that are immigrants, and not only just our clients that are immigrants. We're going to be talking about political anxiety. A lot of our clients might belong to minority groups or BIPOC groups, and they're losing a lot of rights as well under the current policies that are going on. So just I think this is a really good empathy building exercise to just kind of center ourselves, and there's a lot of loss that takes place and is taking place, and how do we sit with that, and how do we support our clients through that. So thank you for that. I think it was a really mindful. Okay, I just want to gonna get a pulse of where we are today. So in the chat, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much does the current political and social climate affect, first of all, you personally, 1 to 10? 1 is it doesn't really affect me, 10 is it is very at the forefront of my mind. And then how much is it affecting the clients you work with? 1 is obviously not at all, 10 is constantly. And this could differ. It could be affecting your clients more than you, depending on your identities. It could depend on your geographic location. We know that there's, a lot of difference in where we sit, like in our spaces geographically. And I just want to preface this too with like, this is a really good reflection for privilege, right? Like we might hold more privilege in our identities than our clients do. Maybe that is due to our gender, or due to our sexual orientation, due to the color of our skin, right? So just something to kind of be getting you to think about. I'm seeing a lot of high numbers, which is probably not surprising because I'm guessing that's why you came today. There's a lot going on right now. And it seems like it's kind of, someone said if you're not feeling something, you're not paying attention, and that really resonated with me right now. So especially in the helping professions, I feel like we have to have some effect in it. So this was just kind of to reflect on where you're at and how it's affecting you personally and how it's affecting your clients, and they might be intertwined, right? Because you might be having clients bring it up in session, and then it's affecting you because you're sitting with that and holding space for that. Okay. Can you think of this is just a reflection. Can you think of a recent moment where politics, policies, or social issues showed up in your work? Where did you experience that in your body? Do you get tense? Is it keeping you up at night? Um, is it affecting your sleep? Is it affecting other areas of your life? And then in the chat, the only thing I want you to share is what's one word to describe how it's feeling for you right now with this coming up. And I definitely encourage you to check out the chat and see what others are saying. Exhausting, powerless, heavy, scared, fear, sadness. I think for me, it's worry for others. That's how it's showing up for me. Okay. So this is just really setting the stage that obviously we're coming from a place where this is creating a lot of feelings for us. Um, we're not gonna we're gonna now get into like what this might be like for clients and how can we center ourselves in our work so that we can show up for our clients and we can show up for ourselves, because I feel like you can't talk on this topic without talking about how we support ourselves and ground ourselves, because we are like, you know how they say always self-care, it's so important, but like really in this work, if we are not grounded and we are not in a place to support, it's going to cause a chain reaction and it's going to bring out more fear and more feeling. So we're going to talk about what you can do also as a mental health professional. Okay. Bonnie's now we're going to get into some of the more background on where we're sitting in today's climate.
Yes, definitely. And understanding each generation, right, of where and how we can be affected. So I appreciate each and every one of you being able to share where and how you are feeling personally, and how your clients are coming in, right, and the weight that is being carried here. So it's so important to also understand with first generation, right? And this would be the individuals who are making this journey in so many different ways and for different reasons, right? We may not all know and understand this story depending on the role that we play, right? As mental health professionals, as social workers, exactly what story this is, right? That might not always open up in our assessments, but it's important that we understand where this individual is coming from. There is very treacherous journeys that have to be made at times, aside from what we were just feeling with what we're having to grieve, that loss of individuals and different things, right, that we were just naming in our activity, um, having to endure a lot within that journey, right? And this looks different for each and every person. But I do want to preface how we may not understand that journey that they come from, right? And just to give a little bit of background, I was able to conduct these specific assessments on what this journey was like for 5 years. From all ages. I had very little ones, which was difficult given that some of them can't speak. Maybe even during COVID times, right? It was hard for them to even learn the language with everyone wearing masks. But learning how different individuals had to travel by train, right? Jumping on the train or jumping off the train, seeing death, seeing substance use that they may have not been exposed to prior to their journey, having to journey because of threats that they were being faced for money, having to be feeling forced to join a gang. Maybe sometimes it was more political, in which their area wasn't safe, right? So understanding the reason behind why they're having to leave, then understanding the journey that they had to face. I had one child share with me how, of course, we had all kinds of activities for them to keep them busy and have them enjoy something. But we would also give away candies on some of the games. And they mentioned how that specific candy was really hard for them to win because that is all they had on their journey. And they saved that candy to have one a day. They didn't have any money to purchase any food along their journey. So also understanding where your clients are coming in from, looking at like their physical health too. At times I would see children like with really sunk in cheeks from, of course, lack of nutrition in their journey and things like that. And of course, this is also for adults as well. So a lot of my experience does come from children, but just acknowledging that journey that's difficult there. And understanding that once they're here, there's so much being faced as well, right? Having that legal fear of their case until it's finalized. And even once it is finalized, right? Um, Still having some fear of deportation and other things, fear while they're driving, while also still having to grieve the loss that we just slightly experienced ourselves, the cultural loss, the language, and acculturation, right? Having to understand all of these legal terms. How hard is it for us to understand some of these legal documents and big words in our own language? Yet alone for them, having to read some of these things or not having access to it in their own primary language, right? So having to think of that for first generation. Now, for second generation, these would be the individuals who have been born here, but are raised by the individuals who came over to this country, right? So within the home setting, we're looking at maybe that primary language being something that is discussed within the home, right? So whether that be Spanish, whether that be French, or anything else that's being carried within your home setting, and you go to school, or you go, of course, once you start working and things like that, having to acculturate yourself to something very different outside of your home setting. And maybe having to bridge that gap too for your own parents, right? French generation, doing some translation of little things like medications, legal documents, being in the grocery store and things like that, and making sure that our parents are understanding um, this language. If they didn't get access or resources to learn the language with where they're moving, or of course being here in the United States. And they can also feel torn between that culture, right? Having culture at home and having a different culture in their school setting. Um, Look, just like any other kids, we all want to fit in. We don't want to be bullied, right? But this can be something that is um, faced by them, as well as third generation. Um, this is where a lot more things can be lost, where maybe the language is practiced, right? Where the language, the primary language of grandparents now at this point, is now lost in the home because now, of course, the parents can kind of like change different things. They're like, well, I grew up in a home where I was speaking, just as an example, like primarily Spanish, and I want my children to understand that when they go to school, right? So they speak English within the home and also the school setting, but then have a loss of language with their grandparents or their other family members. And that's where culture can get lost as well. And there can also be this sense of loss in tradition and maybe fitting in to where it's like, okay, I'm losing part of my own culture of where my family and my roots come from, but I'm also not completely fitting into the culture of where we are at, right? Depending on where they were able to settle at. So it's important for us to understand the identity, avoid assumptions from these clients as well.
Just a point on what Bonnie was talking about. I think it's also really important too that there might be fear to openly engage in their traditions, right? Because right now they might feel that engaging in some of these things might put a target on them. So having to hide or do this in like private settings, that is also something that we need to consider is a lot of people, a lot of clients now are really having to not express those parts of their identity out of fear. So just something to consider also and something to ask at intake is how is that affecting like the ways that you are able to even engage in traditions, cultures, language, that type of stuff. Okay. So Bonnie was focusing on immigration. Now I'm just going to talk more generally about socio-political stress. So what is socio-political stress? It is stress that refers, I'm not going to read like word for word, but it's basically the emotional and psychological strain that's caused by political climates. This can be due to systematic inequality policies that are coming through. And I want to say this is definitely on a national basis, but we know that each state has different laws. So where you're sitting might have very different laws, let's say on like um LGBTQ rights than where I am. There are a lot of state by state laws that are made. And sociopolitical stress it affects everyone, but we're going to frame it in the context of marginalized communities. Here's some examples of stress that are due to policies and sociopolitical policies that affect society. So fear of deportation or immigration, anxiety tied to election and hostile political rhetoric. So speaking out against different political leaders, stress from discriminatory laws, so anti-LGBTQ plus, racist policies, and fear of speaking out against that. Grief from hate crimes or police violence reported in the media. I'm thinking back to 2020 when there was the summer where it was COVID. There was the protests and rallies in support of Black Lives Matter. So these are just some examples of things that relate to sociopolitical stress. Okay. Common emotions that come up. I think every single one of these emotions were listed in the chat of things we're feeling: fear, anger, anxiety, frustration, worry, in addition to a variety of other things. These are just some common ones that are going to come up. What does this cause? It causes high rates of exhaustion, just feeling like I can never catch my breath. It's always something. Overwhelm, anger, even rates of suicidality go up in relation to politics due to the effects that it has on people, right? If you think that certain rights of yours that you maybe once had access to are now being in question or taken away, that can cause a lot of feelings. I'm also thinking for people that don't have support, right? So they're suffering without any sort of supports. They're not getting medical treatment, they're not getting mental health treatment. That can even be exacerbated even more. Here's just some stats. I do want to preface this. This was taken before the election. So I'm sure that they even skew differently now, but it is politics are a stressor. This was right before the election, October 2024. 77% of adults were worried about the future of our country, right? The economy was a big one, 73%. And the people were worried about this 2024 election. 70% of Americans. Does not matter which side of the aisle that you fall on. This is a cross-party concern. And I want to preface this by saying we're not getting into any specifics of politics here, right? But this was across parties. 80% of Republicans, 79% of Democrats, and 73% of independents reported stress around the 2024 election and the nation's future. So this is like, if we put this all together, it's more than 2/3, like wherever you are politically, was worried. So this is going to bring up feelings when people are worried about this. This was a really big one too. 54% of adults expressed no trust in the US government, and 41% considered relocating to another country due to these concerns. These are like big reactions and big feelings that people had, which it's not surprising that we're sitting here today in June 2025 with a lot of emotions coming up, because as you can see here, even before the election, there was big feelings both ways. Okay, now we're going to take a little bit of a turn and talk about when your client comes in. It can be any client, any age, any background. They have layers of, and this could be for us, so you can use this as a reflection for yourself. We come in with layers of stress, and we're going to just quickly talk about what those are. I like to kind of compare it to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like we all have different layers, different functions of our stress, and some are going to be more present than others. Okay. Personal stress, health, finances, identity related challenges. Example, maybe you are someone that lives with a chronic health condition, or maybe you have a family member that has a chronic health condition. Maybe you're struggling financially. That's just like that is something personal to me, right? Like Bonnie and Alex might not be experiencing that in the same way I am. Interpersonal layers of stress. How are your relationships with others, right? You might be in a very high conflict family situation. right? You could be going through a separation. You could be co-parenting. You could have no family support. So you could be isolated. You could be completely by yourself. Or you could be in a workplace that is causing a lot of stress, right? Like any person you interact with, it falls under the interpersonal layer. Collective stress, that's kind of where we're centering today. Societal traumas, right? Wars, disasters, pandemics, legislation, riots, rallies. It seems like anytime you turn on the news, one of these things is at play, right? Like there's also worldwide traumas going on with different wars. If you turn on the news, there's lots of stuff going on with that as well. And then there's specific stress related to minorities or vulnerable population, racism, homophobia, transphobia, poverty. And this is compounded, this is amplified for our minority clients. So just things to think about, that when a client comes in, they might be coming in for, let's say they're just coming in for depression. We need to peel apart these layers, because it's not just, maybe depression is just what we see on the outside, but what's going on at the personal, interpersonal, collective, and the level that they're experiencing as a minority client. So there's a lot to unpack there, right? There's a lot to unpack. Okay, we're gonna do a little case study here. And this is just for you. We're gonna do a little reflection after I go over our case. We're gonna be talking about Jordan. Jordan's pronouns are they, them, and Jordan is 26. Okay. Jordan's identity: non-binary, Black, child of undocumented immigrants, low-income community college student. Okay. Jordan comes in to see us. Say we are doing an intake, we're doing an assessment, we're collecting information. We're going to break down, in the case of Jordan, what stresses they're facing. Okay, personal stress. Jordan manages chronic anxiety without access to affordable mental health care. So anxiety, plus not having access to care. Financially insecure and unsure whether they'll be able to finish school due to rising costs. So community college student, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able to pay my tuition costs. So that's weighing on me. Maybe Jordan has to take on a job or multiple jobs or take out loans. Interpersonal stress. Tensions have grown at home as Jordan navigates their gender identity in a household that doesn't fully understand or support them. At work, they're often misgendered, adding emotional strain. So not only does Jordan have this personal stress, Jordan enters into society, goes to work, goes to school, and within the household, there's stressors playing on Jordan. Collective stress. Jordan is deeply affected by ongoing news of anti-trans legislation and police violence. They live in a community targeted by immigration enforcement, which adds to their overall distress. Lots going on here. And then we do know that Jordan has some identities that intersect with BIPOC, vulnerable, and minority status. Jordan fears for their parents who are undocumented immigrants, especially when ICE actively increases in their area. Their fear is layered with experiences of racism, transphobia, and poverty, making daily life feel unsafe and unpredictable. That's a lot going on. So my reflection here is, say Jordan comes in for you, with you, you've collected this information. How do you center your work? How do you make sense of all of these things that are competing to go on? What came up for you? As I'm reading this, I'm just thinking, wow, Jordan is experiencing a lot. So how do we center ourselves in this? What came up for you just hearing this case? This case vignette, yep. So Carol's talking about how the national suicide number for LGBT youth has been cut, right? That's a lifeline for a lot of people. Going through this case vignette, what was coming up for you? What feelings, what emotions, what empathy feelings are coming up? Does it feel overwhelming? Does it feel scary? Someone saying, how can I build a supportive community for this person? Deep sorrow has to be overwhelming. And I just want us to think clinically for a moment. There are so many different avenues we could start here, right? I'm not going to say there's a right or wrong answer, because that would come up for however you're treating the client. But it's kind of, how many of you have heard of that concept of an invisible backpack? Like, we don't know what people are coming to the table with. If you were just to look at Jordan, you would not see all of these different layers that are at play here, right? Not only the big bucket things like the anti-trans legislation, the ICE rates, there's financial stress. There is stress at home. There is stress at school, right? So there are many, many, many stressors on Jordan at this time. So there's just a lot. We don't know what our clients are bringing with them when they come to see us, is basically what this was supposed to mean. And I hope that when you're doing intakes or starting to build therapeutic relationships with clients, you can start to think of like, what are these stressors, and break it down a little bit more, because sometimes we might miss some of these things. I like to just see it for me as a learner, it's really helpful to see it broken down into these different categories, because sometimes it can get lost, right? It's just like there's so much going on, but thinking it from different layers can really help us conceptualize the case a little bit. Okay. Okay. A little bit more on this. Hold on one second. We're going to talk about the politicized collective identity model. Have any of you heard of this? When I was researching for this, this was the first time that I have heard of this, but it's a really important concept, and we're going to kind of get into the theory behind it. But it's basically a concept that identities become, people say, oh, social work should not be political. That's just not true. We work in a world where there's people, and where there's people, there's politics. Social work is political. So the politicized collective identity model is the process through which power dynamics, community needs, and society form together identities for marginalized groups. The example is Black Lives Matter movement, right? There was this huge movement that kind of gained momentum due to what was going on politically, right? And this is basically minoritized groups, marginalized groups coming together and say, hey, these policies are actually getting to the root of our identity, and we're going to come together to advocate, right? It's really a lot of grassroots, a lot of community movements came out of the idea of this model. We're going to come together, and we're going to collectively come together to fight against this injustice. Okay. What does this model say? These group members often have shared grievances, right? We've been treated unfairly. We've been marginalized. We're coming together. Oftentimes community is within that, right? Like, for better or worse, we're creating community in the fact that we've been treated unfairly. The system's been unjust to us. Collective identity of us versus them being like system, society, right? I think of the Black Lives Matter movement. A lot of, if you think of historically racism and the different, ways that the United States has been set up, there was a sense of us versus them. Societies were set up for usually white. Our policies were set up for white men, right? So this collective identity of these policies don't set up in a way that's going to support us. And then the last step of this model is we're going to push for change. We're coming together. We're going to be activists. We're going to participate politically. And it highlights how individually people are experiencing this, but when we come together, right, we have this collective energy, right? So if you've been watching the news, there was a lot of rallies, there's a lot of marches, there's a lot of protests going on. This is centered in this model. We're coming together. We are, even if you're not a member of the community, you might be an ally of the community, or you have clients that are a part of the community, and we are coming together to say, hey, this is us versus you, and we want to change. So it's most social movements can be rooted in this model. this is nothing huge that is we're going to go over, but basically it's just showing that think of those interpersonal stressors, and maybe this is going on within your own families. Um there are a lot of relationships being strained due to the current political system. If you feel comfortable, I mean, this is happening within my own family, my own circles. How many of you have had some disagreements with people within your circles due to politics in the past 6 months? Yes, I see people in all caps. Yes, absolutely. It is straining relationships. Um, that's for us and that's for our clients. And they're saying that you can see here, the biggest percent that it's affecting is Latino adults and LGBTQ populations. Every day it's occurring here. Um, that's just so for you to note that when clients come in, or even within your own outside of the clinical settings, you might be experiencing strains or disagreements based on people's political values. So it is causing, it's back to that first slide that we talked about, it's causing a lot of strain between interpersonal dynamics. That's important to ask when clients come in, especially, do you have family that can support you? Maybe they're like, absolutely not. I'm over here and my family's over here and we are not agreeing. I've heard of people not speaking to each other. I've heard of relationships being severed due to the politics that we're in right now. Okay. Bonnie's going to take it away from here.
Yes, and further understanding this toll that is being affected by our clients, right? And seeing the vast change within the last 2 years. So in 2023, we saw that there was a really big strain of 41% individuals being very worried about. Whether it be deportation or maybe even possible detention in some way of their case being affected. Maybe even if they're like following through with all of the services and following through with stuff that was court ordered, right? In 2023, it was at 41%, and we have seen it rise by 20% more now at 61%. And this was something done research as of May 2025. So this is definitely some more um, recent numbers, and I was glad that there was some research done on this given like all of the changes and things that are going on. And it can definitely rise with, in May, yes, we have had these things coming up within this year, but we also saw it arise just in this last month, the last 2, 3 weeks, right? In different ways. Right, and it affecting our communities. So something super important for us to note: the clients that are stepping into our spaces, right, and into our therapy room. Of course, we always want to rule out any medical things, right? So having them do a medical exam, ruling out anything that they can address as far as physical health. But always important for us to understand how when we carry some of these stressors, some of these worries, even um, like secrets that are being held within family, right? This can look like physical symptoms, right? So it's important, of course, always to rule out some of these things, but also notice, like, okay, once we've ruled that out, and they've had those assessments done by a medical doctor, now what else do we need to look at, right? Those sleep disturbances, disassociations, hypervigilance, right? Maybe they're not even showing up to our sessions sometimes, right? And we're seeing like lots of cancellation. It's like, oh, what's going on, right? Noticing the change and stress that it can have on our clients, of having to physically drive to the office, right? Is that a safe space for them or a safe route for them, right? So if we're able to, right, be able to venture out into some of those virtual settings or check in and somehow, depending on what your practice looks like, and of course the program and the agency that you're working for, but also considering some of those things because it can definitely be really difficult, and we don't want it to see rule out as like, okay, well, this person no longer wants their services, or maybe make some assumptions, right, of them not liking or getting along, right? It being too much to share some information or other assumptions that we can make. We want to ensure we understand everything all the way around and how there's changes going on right now and that can be coming up, right? We don't know what the future holds. As we mentioned, we were preparing for this months in advance, and there was definitely a lot of changes that happened just recently. So we're definitely.
I just want to also touch on I worked in the schools and from what I have heard from, I don't know if any of you work in the schools, but given some of the spaces where ICE are entering, some kids are no longer going to school. I know it's summer vacation, but some were just staying home out of fear of what might happen, not attending graduations, not attending social events. So think of that isolation piece. And if you don't hear from someone, as you know, as their provider, we want to make sure that we have maybe emergency contacts because we want to ensure safety is really important too. And sadly, I have heard of some people that are working with clients that have been taken in by ICE and are now being possibly deported back. So always touching base with your clients is really, really, really important. And I like that Bonnie said, don't make an assumption that they're no longer engaged. There could be a variety of other things going on. And if their safety is in question, we need to address that first, right? Safety is always the number one priority.
Yes, most definitely. So again, going further into this of seeing like what is this political anxiety that is showing up for us and our clients or even within families, right? So maybe our clients again aren't this specific person who are fearing it, but they're surrounded by this fear as well. I've also seen how there has been the need for some adjustments. I know we're acknowledging that, children translating for parents or translating for someone older is definitely something so heavy to carry and definitely not something right. But we need to understand like where these families are coming from. And unfortunately, this is also something that maybe that's all that they trust, right? Because how is it that we can entrust in another individual and understand where they're coming from and wanting our side of what we're needing, right? So sometimes that's all that's felt, that there's trust in the children having to translate, right? And of course it's very heavy and we need to make some of those assessments and questions of the safety, right? But also noticing how again there's recent adjustments to this of maybe some family members not being comfortable enough to leave, right? So now we're seeing like children making grocery runs, children going out to do errands. And it just kind of depends on what those errands look like, right? Are we going physically into the office to pay a water bill or pay an energy bill and things like that? Um, Asking medical questions, and how much responsibility and toll that looks like on these individuals. Is that individual our client as well? So understanding this, and also I completely understand that concept behind like some neglect, abandonment, and things like that. But doing a full assessment on this and seeing, is there fear, right, being part of this, right? Is there complete neglect in this, or is it just that fear is a part of this, right? So also taking that into consideration. And of course, around this as well, families can be impacted by those threats, having fears of deportation, and these very quick policy shifts. And some really great things I see um, within teachers of communication that I've had with different community members is that sometimes teachers are going out to do those home visits, which I think is very neat because we as community, like mental health professionals and social workers, might be very familiar with those home visits. And maybe we're having to do some more, right? To again understand that fear around, are they able to travel? Why is it that they're not showing up to school? Or whatever setting this is, right? Of our office visits and things like that. So understanding the full story behind where our clients and the family is coming from.
Yeah, and just one note on the policy shifts. I feel like even in the past, like Bonnie said, weeks, things have changed and they're like ever changing nowadays. I'm just out of curiosity, how many of you in your places of work have certain protocol or have talked about what happens if ICE does come to your place of employment? Do you have that? Do you know what to do if that happens? I'm sure it's going to be mixed. Some agencies are probably ahead of it, where others maybe are having to think quickly and pivot and come up with some of these. So if you do work with clients, I would also, we're gonna have this as part of the toolkit, but like understanding what rights are, what our clients' rights are, what your rights are, when they can enter, when they can't enter. I know a lot of higher education systems are also putting stuff into place. So I see a lot of people just saying yes. It's ever evolving and it's ever changing. So I would just say make sure that you know, should this happen, what your policy is or what your agency's protocol is for that. And as we're moving into the second part where we just kind of discussed, set the stage of where we are, how many of you are feeling stuck right now as mental health professionals? There's so much going on, I don't know where to begin, or this just feels like too much. Like, what feelings are coming up for you as a helping professional? Maybe it's some people are like, this is firing me up more to do advocacy work, where other people are just like, it's too much right now. Or maybe you're somewhere in between, or maybe that fluctuates. Maybe one day you're feeling really, that's me, right? Like some days I'm like, really, I'm gonna try to get involved with advocacy and I want to really have my voice be heard. And then other days it's just too much. It's just too much. And that might be difficult to hold space on certain days. So I'm just stating that there's a lot going on. So be mindful, check in with yourself. You're human. We can't hold everything together all the time and hold space for ourselves. So we're going to talk about ways that you can kind of balance this, compartmentalize this, and hopefully you'll get some tools here. But knowing, I just want to state that, like, we're not going to approach this, Bonnie and I talked, we're not going to approach this with positive toxic positivity. Like, we're not going to frame that this is, everything's going to be okay, and we're gonna just move from a place of positivity, because that's not reality right now. So take what you need from this, and take, each person's going to be different. So what you need is going to look different from the next person. So we're going to jump in a little bit more. So I am going to move my tab over so I can read this. Okay. Clients that are coming in, I also want to preface this next portion that we're going to go over. This can be for clients and it also can be for yourself, right? So anything that we are going over in the next part of our session, take what you need for your clients, but also this can be used for yourself at any time as well. So of course, first we want to validate emotions. So what are they going through? Acknowledge that and validate that. Whatever it is that they're going through is their story. They're the experts on it, and what their response is their response. It helps them feel understood and accepted. What we don't want to do is say, oh, it's not that bad, you'll get through this. That toxic positivity does not meet them where they're at, because for a lot of people, this is actually situations of, my livelihood is at question here. My livelihood's at stake. Okay. This is really important for us and for our clients. What can we control? I cannot personally control what happens day to day in the Oval Office, right? Like, I will never have access to that, and I don't ever want to have access to that. What can we tell our clients that they can control versus what is out of their control? So I always say control the controllables. What is outside of their control, because we can't give all of our energy and all of our time to things that are completely out of our control. What can we control? Self-care, socializing in ways that are safe, attending community events that align with interests and comfort levels. For some of our clients, it might be literally cooking a meal with a family member. That might be their form of self-care right now. It might be calling a family member and chatting with them once a week. Do you know what self-care also might be? Turning off the news for a day, right? Um, Taking apps off of your phone because they're just consuming way too much of your time. So these are all things that we can control how much time we're on our phone, right? I have had to be really mindful that I don't get super sucked into doom scrolling, and it's just so hard right now, right? Because you get into it and then it's hard to step away. I want you for your clients to normalize that this is a very scary time. It is absolutely a scary time. They are living in fear, and that is an appropriate response, right? This is common and this is valid. Yes, what you're experiencing absolutely deserves space. Um, Also, talking about that politicized collective model here, communities can be formed based on what's happening here. So, if possible, we want to reduce isolation as much as possible. Is there even one or two people that we can connect them with so they have some community? Um, Maybe there is groups going on, or maybe there is like local public events that are safe, of course, but we would never want to put our clients in unsafe situations, but finding connections that are safe and can help the clients feel less alone. There are other people going through what they are going through, so we want to make sure that we are connecting them in those ways. Okay.
And I want to preface the great technology that we have now with our phones, right? So also helping with that isolation. If we understand that some of their family members can be at a distance, and if they're wanting to reconnect in some way with their roots, with like making a meal, I strongly encourage like connecting over FaceTime somehow. A lot of the times they use WhatsApp to reconnect with others across different countries. And we can FaceTime and learn about the meals, learn about the traditions, and try to implement them in their lives, right? So definitely encouraging our clients as well to have that open communication. Of course, as they're having healthy relationships with these individuals, so they can also learn so much more about it and still feel that connection with them.
And also the good old landline. Obviously, it's probably not a landline anymore, but just a phone call, right? It doesn't have to be anything fancy, a phone call. Maybe they want to email, like, right? Hey, snail mail. Maybe they're going to write a letter to someone. There are ways that people can connect that don't just necessarily have to be on social media. They're in person, people can connect as well. This is a big one, and I just want you to self-reflect for you. Limit media consumption. Um, Setting boundaries with news and social media can be really helpful. How many of you at times have felt absolutely consumed with the news cycle and social media, and it's actually had a really negative effect on you? I absolutely have seen this happen. Um, do you ever go on vacation and like you take a couple days away and you come back and you're just like, oh my gosh, how did all of this happen in those like 2 days that I was away? I encourage you to set boundaries with news and social media. Um, I've encouraged some clients as well as myself to maybe shut it down at a certain hour of the day, or maybe you're just checking once a day for the news, because I'm not saying completely, we're saying definitely you need to stay abreast to what's happening, but don't let it completely consume all hours of your life, right? um it's important to stay checked in, but do you need constant updates every hour? Maybe if you have those alerts coming up on your phone, you turn them off, right? Because you will be buzzing with notifications very, very, very often. um and this is important for our clients too. Also, I think that what happens on social media is, we know with algorithms and whatnot, we get more and more and more of what we're engaging in, so then it's like it's just constant, right? Because we're clicking on this, and for better or worse, it just becomes all consuming. Okay. Also fact check, someone said that, like, make sure that you as the clinician are supporting really good literacy with social media. And what I mean is that they're getting credible news sources, you're getting credible news sources. AI and all these things, there's so much like bad unfactual news out there. So make sure that you are really vetting what you see and not spreading misinformation as well, because that is a huge problem too with AI now. There's these videos being passed around. So um, make sure that you just are researching everything and making sure that your clients have access to really credible sources too. And then, of course, we always want to maintain ethical boundaries. We have to recognize our own political biases, however that comes up. I'm not saying self-disclosure, there's an appropriate time and place for it, right? But remember that when a client's in session, it's not your space to just dump your feelings, and it's not your space to vent, right? Like, that is a different place that you would need to do that in. Maybe that's through consultation or through connections. But and in some cases, I've heard of people having a really hard time in sessions because they're having difficulty managing some of what's coming up for them. So uphold client autonomy. Always follow your code of ethics wherever mental health professional you sit in, and try to, like I said, be appropriate if you're using self-disclosure, but you don't want it to become a political vent session. That's not the purpose of what it is. Also, this is something that came up. I have heard some people that have to be more mindful depending on your agency. Anyone's allowed to protest, right? That is our right as Americans, but make sure what context you're doing it in. Do you want to share on social media? I've already heard of people in higher education falling under fire for attending some stuff, and the university said you were, representing us poorly. So it's a lot to consider, but always consider code of ethics, and for our clients, right, we want to make sure that we are being confidential and we are seeking supervision when necessary.
Yes. And I know I touched on this just a bit earlier, right? Understanding this journey that is considered within their lifetime, right? So it's important that we understand the migrant experience, and how it's something that is an ongoing trauma, right? So within our assessment, if this is something that information that we collect, or if it's something that we're collecting, being very considerate of how they're having to reshare this story. So as they're resharing this story, understanding how they're having to relive this, right? And some of this, of what they're sharing, might look like experiencing some things that happened pre-migration, whether they were exposed to war, lots of violence in some way, whether that be war related or unwar related, experience as far as poverty and family trauma. Of course, a loss of home and loss of stability, depending on what it is that is being impacted in their own community, right? Then, of course, during this journey, having that very dangerous crossing of how they had to travel, whether, as I mentioned earlier, like on the train, or even as some of us may have seen through the back of like an 18-wheeler, right? And being very in confined settings like that, or even temperatures of what I have been shared. And even the treatment, understanding how, although there can be caravans, which are very large groups of people who can travel together, maybe in our mind we initially think like, oh, that's great, they got to travel in a caravan with a group of people where they were connected, everyone all together with the same goal, right? But unfortunately, at times this is their means of survival, right? And I have personally heard some stories of which, they were mistreated in some of these ways by these individuals. So understanding that um, migration journey, and witnessing it as well. Maybe it wasn't something experienced by them, but also something witnessed. And then post migration, once they're in our setting, or maybe some services prior to our setting, depending on how we're serving these clients, understanding some racism that they might be experiencing, that language barrier that they can be experiencing. So we do want to ensure that we are asking, like, what is your primary language? What would you prefer to speak in, right? And ensuring that we are getting an interpreter if we cannot speak their language or dialect, right? ensuring that the documents that we're providing, or maybe even worksheets of things that we are providing for them, are in their language and that they're understanding these things. Um, and as we provide this setting for them, keeping these things in mind, right? I think it's so important to consider where we're coming from, depending on our office, right? I had a very special position to see these clients as they were first coming in, and seeing them in a setting to provide all of these services, right? But if we're in the school setting or the hospital setting as well, understanding the type of um, food that they're being provided at school, at the hospital, and we know, like, okay, this client isn't eating, right? But is there something more to that, right? Not just diet and some restrictions that they may need to have due to medical reasons, but also due to their culture, right? And are they feeling safe within this space, right? I love to ask, like, are you feeling comfortable? Is there something that is uncomfortable for you in this space, right? Asking even with lighting, right? If it's too bright in there, if it's too dark in there, maybe we want to set that like really cozy feeling in our therapeutic spaces, but sometimes that can be very scary for them. So just also understanding that and how it relates to these experiences of pre-migration or even during their journey, right? And we're wanting to respect their culture. So if we have those extra connections with their family members, because we can definitely struggle with this. We understand we want to educate ourselves with textbooks and their culture if it's something very different from us, and that's really great. But having that conversation with family, if we can definitely go a really really long way. I personally had a client who was struggling; she wasn't eating, and there was a lot of other things and behaviors, and it was really hard to get some of these services to her, but I was understanding, like, it's a lot of the culture, she's not used to this, and so I had a conversation with a caregiver, and said, "Hey, what's her favorite food? Can we try and make that? Can you explain what this is to me, so that we can provide this, or some favorite activities, right? So that we can provide some comfort within that space, right? Or within the activities that we're doing. Let's have a conversation around food. Let's have a conversation around traditions, so that you can build that rapport with them. And that's something so important that we have to consider and not close off. Okay, this client isn't eating, right? And there's some concerns there. But what is it beyond that, right? Is there something that's culturally related to this, with the journey that they experience? And also in relation to the journey, as I shared, a lot of these individuals may be struggling with finding food along their way or can't afford food along their way. So also just being patient with the amount of food that they're eating. Maybe they're just having to slowly pick up that amount, right? They're going, as I shared, not everyone experiences this, but having just that one piece of candy or one um, item throughout their entire day, and then they're coming to the hospital setting if they're coming in for dehydration or something, right? And we're giving them these full meals and the nurse is noting, like, patient isn't eating, right? Patient just picking at this or whatever the case might be, and we're wanting to follow up. But just noticing that, right? How where they're coming from, the amount that they were eating before, and just seeing that gradual difference too, or just considering that. And of course, as mentioned earlier, just briefly, our ethical responsibilities. So important. I understand that we can hold our own values, beliefs, and all of that. But we have ethical responsibilities. And this is something that we can always hold ourselves accountable to make sure that we are building the correct space for our clients, whoever that might be, right? So we want to consider, of course, that dignity and worth of our client. We want to ensure that we are considering the competence and cultural humility behind this, right? So again, that research that we can do, those extra communications for this client of ensuring that, and client self-determination and community safety, right? So ensuring that with some of the activities, maybe even homework assignments, right? Sometimes we can teach the clients all of these things, wonderful tools. And when we still send them out there, understand that self-determination, right? Within this. Um, so I did have a few questions in regards to this. if we can kind of share in the chat. If we notice that we get a client, maybe a minor, and they're sharing this fear of a raid coming to their neighborhood, sorry. What is our ethical responsibility within documentation when a client shares this with us? What is our ethical responsibility to document when a client has shared fear of a raid?
And Bonnie's referring to like your case notes or how you document that session. If you're in a clinical setting, what, you know, must be in the note, what do we leave out?
Yeah. So I see definitely keeping the notes as neutral as possible, being vague, right? And we want to ensure that we're documenting this information, but we can document this in the best way of being vague and being clear, right? Because again, we're wanting to ensure the dignity and worth of our client, the self-determination behind some of the things that we are withholding there, right? So, of course, we're always wanting to document what is clinically relevant to our client, right? What is the emotional distress that was expressed here, right? Was there fear being expressed? Maybe there was sadness or anger towards that, and we can document all of that. But we want to avoid identifying, including any identifiable information, right? Would we have to include like addresses and sibling names?
No.
Yeah, definitely not. We don't want to include extra information that's not needed there, right? We're not wanting to include immigration. We can include immigration stressors, right? But just as far as what are the stressors that arose in the session, right? So we're gonna get a little bit further into this, but I did want to touch base on this and how important it is to understand the ethical responsibility that we have. So if we find that we're struggling with something within our office setting, within the services that we're providing, always coming back to ethical responsibilities with the services that we're providing, because that is going to keep us in line and get to answer some questions that we have around what we're providing and how we are showing up for our client. And of course, we will shortly here, we'll go over how what are some things that we need to do for ourselves so that we can show up in these ways, right? Because of course, we need to take care of ourselves.
I just want to quickly touch on Bonnie's going to go through an example of like a do not document versus like an appropriate neutral documentation. Also, I just want to preface this by we could be audited at any time, right? So, of course, you want to make sure that you have all the information that is necessary, but we need to. Code of ethics says do no harm, right? So we don't want to put our clients in a place that we're doing more harm to them. We're bringing, and also like for example, I have a lot of coworkers that work either for the VA or government entities, and their files are being audited, right? So if you are unsure of like what do I include, what do I not include, I definitely encourage you to seek supervision around that, because we don't want to do more harm to our clients by putting information that could potentially put them in danger or in harm.
Yeah.
And people are asking like how do you document safety planning? Definitely, like I said, ask your agency, and you might be the one saying, hey, we need a policy around this, because some people might not have thought about it yet, right? When I worked in Washington DC, when we would take notes, like we would maybe like if this was a note shared, not in the clinical note, but maybe just note shared like for the whole school thing, we definitely would not use names, we would use initials. Just ways to protect client in case, right? Like someone, like for example, I'm thinking I was in a meeting with a multidisciplinary team, so principal, teachers, and we would have shared notes, and there was a client who was fearful that their parent would be deported. We did not put any of that in the note, right? We just said client has family stressors or family fears, and we just put initials for that client. However, you don't want to not document important things that must be there, right? So if it is a safety concern, of course you have to to document. So it is really actually a very fine line. So if this isn't, I feel like we could have a whole training on documentation, but if this is an area where you're a little unclear, always ask your supervisor or advocate for policies or trainings that will help you in this area. Okay. Bonnie talked about this. We shared a little bit. She's going to go through an example in just a moment, but if possible, limit referencing their immigration status, because this could be pulled. And if in many cases, it's not important to list their immigration status, right? It's more important to list the symptoms, functioning, avoid any criminalizing language, and then use coded language. Bonnie will talk about this in a minute to describe risk without jeopardizing their safety. It's a very fine line. Okay. Bonnie's going to give us our example now of what not to do and what would be in a more appropriate case note.
Yes, definitely. So we do see a big X here. So just understanding as I go through this and as you all see this, understanding what are the um, unethical things that are being documented here, right? So we're documenting here that we're seeing a 15-year-old undocumented minor, right? So there we're first mentioning that. Disclose that their mother informed of them of an upcoming ICE raid. I did want to keep this to something that was current. Um, and it was something that was to occur by their nearby their apartment complex this weekend. The clients shared that they were very afraid of their parents being deported and being left behind, right? So there's definitely some concerns that are here, but also some things that are too detailed, right? As we're sharing here in the comments. Um, and here they also reported how they're constantly checking social media for updates. So we're seeing that they're being affected by social media, which we were sharing, right? Having that really big boundary on that. We understand that this can be something important, but if it's affecting us, noting how it's affecting our clients as well. Um, the client has even noted that they've memorized local police scanner frequencies as a case of emergency. So some of the changes that they've made within their environment, within the time and how what they're focused on, as well. Something so important to note. Client was becoming emotional, right? So we're sharing here that the client was crying, stating that I know I will be next, right? So there's some really strong context and words that are being shared within our session. They also shared more details as far as other family members being detained by Border Patrol the previous year. So having this experience, right, from a previous family member as well. So understanding how this experience was for someone else and awaiting this removal proceeding. With this, the clinician provided some education on ICE procedures. The clinician also provided information on immigration law basics and advice to the client to keep information documents ready in case of being detained, right? In this case, of course, we have that X there. Clinician also suggested that the client speak to local immigration attorney and get help as soon as possible, right? So we're definitely noticing a lot of things here. The clinician also went further. I understand we can be very driven to advocate for our clients and do something more, right? We're all feeling very motivated. We're all here showing up in a very wonderful way, right? And this clinician also seemed to be very motivated in some way, although here they wrote a letter on the client's behalf confirming that the family's experience and hardships, right, due to this threat of deportation. And then, of course, we end our session with understanding what we were able to do, right? Review the client's lift of safety within their house, making sure that we have a plan for them of escape if their home was raided. And the client left visibly distressed. So clinician will follow up next week and we will attempt to contact family if for further intervention.
So we're going to go to the next slide, but in the chat, what are some things that are way too much information to put in a case note? Just put them in the chat and we're going to kind of highlight in red this is way too much information. Like, this is a play by play of everything going on. Also, some people might have their own personal notes from session that would not go into the case file, right? Because like maybe this is just, locked away somewhere for your own personal, but this is way too much information for a case note. No one needs to know this much, but what are some of the like no-nos that are like, this is not necessary for case documentation? Everyone, and Bonnie's going to go over, you'll see there's a lot going on here. This is what happened. This is a detailed description of what happened, but what we document does not need to be all of this.
Yeah, so thank you all for sharing in the chat. We have that very clear, very first line, right? We are disclosing the status of this individual being undocumented and being a minor, right? We also are disclosing of this upcoming event in detail, right? So understanding that yes, there's an upcoming event that is very stressful to our client, but we're explaining that in much detail that does not need to be shared, right? Here, I was also sharing some further details of just some examples that their parents' full names here, right? Um, so just showing that and how that shouldn't be something that's included. And we'll be sharing another note of what we would like to see, right? Or what we should be documenting, right? But not including full names, right? If that's not something that is needed, even though we have that information and we have that in the client file, right? Um, Explaining that deportation, right? So again, acknowledging these two individuals and even our own client, right, of that deportation and their status. Of course, that stress of checking social media updates on immigration, um, and some of the experience that they have with local police, with scanning those frequencies there, that share of we will be next, right? Considering that status again, because we're pointing that out one more time, expressing how the uncle was previously detained by Border Patrol. So also disclosing some of that information, maybe possibly like disclosing the uncle's name, maybe even their age, right? That's not something that needs to be included. Sharing the where the uncle is currently at, right? So it says currently at the detention center, um, awaiting removal proceedings, right? So we're giving lots and lots of updates, and it's great that the client has a lot of comfort in sharing this information with us, but it is not something that needs to be included within our documentation. Now, it's important for us to understand what our role is for these clients, right? I understand some of us couldn't be in roles such as pro bar, right? And those are like really, really great services if we've heard of them. Those are geared more towards legal services, but understanding our role, right? Ethically, we are not able to provide any legal information. So here, giving that information on immigration law basics, even though it's just the basics, right? We're unable to provide some of that information. We can provide those client rights, but we're unable to give any legal advice, right? And ensuring like how they're ready for their case, suggesting that they talk to an attorney to get help as soon as possible, right? That is not part of our role. We need to understand our ethical standards and values for our client and the role that we have. And lastly, here too, I understand we want to take that step further. We want to advocate for our clients. We want to make sure that they're safe and they're comfortable. But writing a letter to identify the client status, the family status, and making them maybe putting a possible target on them, right? We're wanting to ensure the safety, and that is not ensuring the safety of our client, which also kind of discloses those last two. So, how we can change this up with still documenting what is it that happened in our session. Here we see that we still met with a 15-year-old client, right? But this client presented with increased anxiety related to the external threats, right? It's not disclosing what is it that's happening. There's just some external things that are happening and impacting the community. and impacting the family, right? So we're noting that, but it doesn't say, it could be anything, right? As far as our documentation. They also reported and presented with worry, this hypervigilance, right? We noted that social media, we noted that the client was listening into the radio, having some difficulty sleeping, concentrating, and of course, this heightened emotional reactivity of them, right? So noting our clinical perspective of the client, of how they presented in the session, some of the things that they were sharing as far as their day-to-day activities, noting some of that, because that was not noted and mentioned in the previous notes. Now, what are we doing on our side to provide some skills and tools in this, right? So here we see the session focused on emotional safety. We use some grounding techniques. We used reflective listening with the client, and of course, provided some psychoeducation and support to the client, right? To normalize these stress responses, right? So we're still being able to document the information of this session, but as far as what is happening to the client in a very neutral way without providing any specific details. And we are also including, which is so important, our part of what we're providing to the client in this space, right? So our clinical observation and also tools that were being applied. Then,
Yeah.
of course, lastly, our plan, right? What comes next and what is our plan for this client? Megan, go ahead.
Yeah, so notice here, this is even I work in private practice, still a lengthy note. It could probably even be down from here, but the point of this was for educational purposes. So you can just see that there does not need to be all those details. This actually, if I were reading it as an outside person, it gives me a very clear, concise sense of what is going on. So notice we've taken out all of like the charged words, all of the identifying information, and it's much more neutral and to the point. It still explains what's going on. We still have a sense clinically of where we're at and where we're going. Okay. For sake of time, we're just gonna quickly go through this and say, of course, you always want to be trauma informed. Um, there always make sure your spaces are safe. That can be a variety of different things, right? Like, are they physically safe? Are they emotionally safe? Are they digitally safe? Providing social psychoeducation, and we want to be affirming. We're not going to get into this too much just for the sake of time, but always keep trauma informed approaches in the back of your mind as you're providing services for your clients. Okay, Bonnie's gonna go through an exercise that you can do, and we're gonna do it together.
Yes. So we may know and have seen, of course, the beautiful meaning behind the monarch butterflies. They migrate, right? And they're also a beautiful symbol of change and transformation. So I did want to include it on there, and how there's a wonderful technique around grounding with a butterfly hug. I mean, we can do this in two different ways with our hands. So just to show you all up here, we're going to interlock our thumbs. So just like this, but it's going to be interlocked here on our chest, right? So as we're comfortable, it can be either or, right? But we're interlocking our thumbs here and we're placing them on our chest. And this is a beautiful butterfly, right? So this is our butterfly hug. Now, if we're not comfortable here in this space, let me go ahead and move this. With doing the butterfly here on our chest, we can just kind of crisscross our arms on our hands on our arms, sorry, right here, and that creates a beautiful butterfly as well. So we can do this with ourselves, and we can do this with our clients. We're gonna go ahead and do this however we are most comfortable. I'd like for us to just notice before we get started, where is it that our um, body is feeling maybe some tension and some stress, right? That's being carried. I understand there was a very hard topic being covered here, right? And we've been going through some really hard times. It's Friday, so maybe there's some very heavy things that we've heard this week, right? And some really big spaces that we held this week. I appreciate you all showing up for your time here today, but I'd like for you to make some time for yourself. So let's go ahead and notice any tension that is being held anywhere, any heaviness that is being held anywhere. And we're going to make our beautiful butterflies on our chest or on our arms. And we're slowly going to make some tapping motions, right? So here on our chest or here on our arms, we'll slowly make some tapping motions where we're comfortable. And we will do some breathing here slowly. We'll breathe in and out. Breathing in and out. Noticing this tension, hopefully slowly disappearing, right? Because we've noticed where it's coming from. We're wanting to release some of this tension. We're going to go ahead and breathe in and breathe out. Breathing in and breathing out. And when we're ready, we'll go ahead and relax ourselves. And maybe I love to kind of move my head around and see if we're feeling a lot better, right? Releasing that tension. So I know we started off pretty heavy there, and we covered some really heavy things throughout this hour, but I hope that this exercise was something wonderful for you and something wonderful that you can also practice with your clients in creating these beautiful butterflies. And as I like to say, to let my clients know to kind of fly off and venture off into wonderful things and wish them all the best, right? So we can also utilize the butterfly in so many wonderful ways as well.
Thank you for that, Bonnie. I don't know. Okay. We're gonna talk about some mantras or some sayings, some words that can help you ground when things feel really overwhelming. Um, we have a worksheet we're gonna share with these. We're gonna have ones for clients that they could maybe write or repeat or post somewhere, but they're really to help them take this big scary feeling of dread, of overwhelm, and bring it back to the self. So some grounding mantras that they might be able to use is I do not need permission to take up space. Every single human being is allowed to take up space. And letting them know you don't need permission for that. You can take up space. I have a right to rest, to dream, and to exist fully. Right? I love that one. Some of these are just so powerful, but when you're feeling so helpless and out of control, these are some things that can really bring you back. For maybe clients that are immigrants or are fearful of possible deportation, I come from a line of survivors. I'm not alone. Notice here, it's not any toxic positivity, like I'm going to be okay. It's I come from survivors and other people have done this too. I forgot to preface this at the beginning, but it feels like it's unprecedented, but there have been times historically throughout history where we have been in very scary, hard moments. And we need to learn from that and remember that human beings are very resilient as well. So just the power of humans coming together and community is resilient. I do not have to prove my humanity. I love that one, right? Because how much are people's humanity and their identities being weaponized right now or being degraded? My story holds weight even when it's ignored. So these are some that you can use for clients. And they can pick what ones work for them or the point of them is to ground them and to give them a sense of power and control when things can feel very out of control and very powerless. Here are some mantras that you might want to use when things are feeling like you can't make any difference or it just feels so overwhelming. I am not responsible for the entire system. I can still make a difference. I think so many of us were like, we're not making a change. Just holding up and showing space is a huge thing. You are showing up, you're holding space, and you're supporting your clients in that way. And no, you won't be able to control the entire system, but you can make waves in the system, right? I think sometimes we take the burden of all of that. I bring radical empathy into this room and I leave with radical care for myself. What you're bringing in and that care and that devotion to your clients, I encourage you to bring it back to yourself. I can hold space without holding it all. I love that one because sometimes we feel like we have to hold it all and you can hold space, but that does not mean you have to you have to carry everything. It's just not possible. We don't need all the answers. We just need to show up. And just knowing that we don't have all the answers and stating that out loud can be really powerful. Just knowing that like there are a lot of things I can't control, but I'm going to show up for my clients every day, right? That right there is sometimes all we can do. Okay. Bonnie's going to go ahead and talk about how do we hold the space for ourselves?
Yes, and just as Megan mentioned, with a lot of those statements there, with the butterfly hug and these tools, right, that we can use, understanding this vicarious trauma that we can be holding, right, as we shared those numbers as we were just starting, right, being aware of where we're coming from in the hard days or sessions that we're having. I myself also noticed like having like a really difficult session, and then the next client was having some really happy news, right? But noticing like, do we need to step out into the restroom and take a moment for ourselves? Do we have a space within our office that we can step out for some fresh air, use a butterfly hug, listen to some music that can be refreshing to us, right? But noticing how we can carry this as well. Of course, peer support can be so helpful, supervision, the consultations that we can have, and always refreshing ourselves on our ethics, and understanding that we can make a step aside just as you did today. You showed up for this training, so you are making a difference by educating yourself today. And we can also do this by advocating, right? I know there was a question here, like, what else can we do? I strongly recommend being able to like connect with your NASW chapter and seeing what is it that they're doing. Are they speaking with a capital on behalf of some of these things, or can they? You can bring it up yourself and see if they're not doing it yet. Let's bring up that topic.
Yeah. I also want to put a push. People said like, I'm not really sure like what to include. I always encourage everyone to make sure that you have insurance, right? Like if you are fully licensed or you are insured, usually under those policies, you do have access to consults, legal consults under malpractice insurance. If you're in question, like of maybe some information's being subpoenaed or you're not sure, like you can always reach out to your professional liability insurance and they should be able, they have lawyers on hand, the people that do the expert stuff in law that we don't. Use that too as a resource as well, right? That's what they're there for. So it's really important too that you use any resources. And if it's outside of your scope, you're making sure to connect with the people that are able to support, right? We're not providing legal advice. So leave that to the people in those areas. Okay. This is going to take a moment to pull up because it is a link. There we go. You can go ahead and I hope it will work. Take a picture of this QR code. Let's see if this tech plays nice.
I tried it yesterday, so it should work. And tried it in different accounts as well. Megan, do you mind clicking the very small arrows? They're like, yeah, there's changing.
Yes.
So we can see the rest of the documents. There's several documents here that we
I'll
can
make
go
it
over.
bigger too.
Thank
So
you.
we will be providing this for you. So you can take and please, we're not gatekeeping this. Please share this with people. I know some people are like weird about copyright and stuff, but this is really important stuff and you need to take this out to your colleagues and your other people in your circle. So please share this widely. This is how we're going to wrap up for today, is kind of just walking you through some of our resources that you're going to be leaving with. Here is a little PDF infographic of how you can talk to clients about this. And it has, create safety, listen and reflect, explore impact, coping and care. This might be something that you keep in your office or before you're having a session with a client, you're kind of reviewing. It's just like, so reminders. It's just a little reminder sheet so that you will know what to do. And then okay, I'll go over this and then Bonnie's going to go over. These are some activities that you might need to do for self-care. And it's really to help you support your clients. It's to support you. So this is when you're starting to feel overwhelmed. You need to connect with self. You need to get back to, making sure you're grounded and you're not feeling overwhelmed. Where do you feel signals in your body? We feel physically stuff. What are you thinking about? and how are you behaving, right? Maybe it's making you really irritable and you're lashing out more, or maybe you're starting to withdraw and you're not hanging out with friends or peers. And you can do it for different signals. How do you feel disconnected? Maybe some people are dissociating. How are you over identifying? I know that's a big one, especially if you have clients that have shared identities with you. Is it becoming a point where you're over identifying and you're having some of that vicarious trauma show up? Um, how often do you go into fix it mode and like, I need to fix this problem right now, right? Where do you feel that? And how often are you feeling hopelessness or fatigue? So that's another way that you can kind of check in. I also say that you can use this with clients. I think this is a great activity that like you could use for clients for different stressors that they have. Um, then there's just a little plan of how do you regulate, how do you respond, and then circles of influence is really to help you. It's really kind of like a CBT exercise, but what's in your power right now? It's your inner circle. What can you support slowly? That's not necessarily right this second. I have to have urgency for this. And what can I not change? But you can still have thoughts on it. You can grieve that you feel helpless in this, right? So I think it's really good sometimes also to work with circles of influence and what is in your control. And as it gets further out, how do you need to deal with certain stressors that do feel like they're completely out of our control? And then Bonnie's going to go quickly over this one.
Yes, then we have grief beyond borders. So I hope that this is a very helpful activity, maybe for little ones, your clients who are more creative and would like to draw. So there's some really great squares here, sorry, to give them some space to draw and be creative, right? But we want to create a space so that we understand what is it that they're grieving, right? So that feeling that they're missing, that one thing that they had to leave behind, very similar to that activity that we did at the very beginning, but getting to build this rapport with the client to further understand this and open up this conversation in a very creative way. Making space for that healing. So we have some circles for them to bubble in. And there's a short space here, but of course we can maybe provide an extra sheet of paper for them to write a short letter or message to someone or something that they miss. So having them work through their grief as well.
Bonnie, we had someone ask if we could get these in Spanish. Bonnie is our Spanish speaker. We would have to like spend some time, but I really would like to have this to the best of our abilities be translated. So, Alex, can you make a note that we can work on that for this specific stuff? If we can at least get some of them translated. If it's not everything, that'd be great if we can get some of them. We will work on it.
Yes, definitely.
I think
Thank you.
that's a really good idea. And then of course, we went over some of the mantras. I think I'm gonna actually like hang this up in my office or some of my workspace. There's even more mantras for clients and mantras for clinicians to use. Some more that are included here. My story holds weight even when it's ignored, right? You are holding space. That's huge. The future is unclear, but I will meet it one moment at a time, right? I like those ones. And then for clinicians, obviously the ones we covered. I love this one. I do not need to be everything for everyone. How many times do we feel like we need to be everything for everyone? Because that's just who we are as helping professionals. I love this one too. My care is a form of quiet resistance. You showing up here, you taking care of yourself, you holding space, that is resisting, right? Even in whatever small way, it is. So these could be really powerful too for some of our clients as well. I really like them. Okay, I'm going to exit out of that. And let me go back to sharing. I think we did well on time. We're gonna we did our check-in question at the beginning. We're gonna do one last kind of reflection and check-in. I want you to be able, I hope you found some good resources and tools and strategies. We wanted to kind of just focus on the day-to-day. What can you do? But what's one strategy that you're gonna take from today to help a client regain a sense of safety or agency, or maybe for yourself? A strategy or a tool or a resource, something that you're going to take from today, you can put in the chat that really spoke to you or you feel is doable in your work. And we have lots: the butterfly hug, mantras, note taking, grounding. Maybe there's a mantra you're going to take today that's like, I showed up. And today that was my form of resistance. I showed up to this training for 2 hours, right? I held space for someone in this hour. I can't control everything, but I can show up with empathy. I can show up with positive, unconditional positive regard for my clients. Oh, I like that someone said it's nice to know I'm not alone, right? There's like 70 plus people here. It feels isolating, but we're not alone. Right here, this is resistance, us showing up today. Building resiliency, reaffirmation, unconditional support, listening techniques, case notes. Okay. Here's our references that you're also going to have access to if you're wanting to dive a little bit deeper. Here is our references. You will also get access to this as well. I hope you enjoyed this continuing education course from Agents of Change. Want to earn your CE credits for this course? Visit agentsofchangetraining.com or the link in the description to purchase the course and take the post test. If you're looking for more CEs, check out our unlimited plan. You will get unlimited access to 150 plus ASWB and NBCC approved continuing education courses for one low annual fee. We're always adding new courses. Did I mention we also have 5 free CE credits available too? Check it out at agentsofchangetraining.com.